Alrighty, everybody, welcome back. We have a very awesome talk from Chris Mountford. He's a developer advocate at Atlassian. He's actually been with us for over 10 years, so he was, I think, one of the first 25 employees at Atlassian, and today we are, I think, over 2,000. So he's seen quite a bit of growth. He's very familiar with how we operate, and he's here to give you the inside story of how we make software at Atlassian. A little fun fact about Chris, he's been working on a project called Atlassian Tech TV. You'll probably see us tweet about it. Chris Mountford has tweeted about it as well. And it's going to be coming out. So if you really like the content in this talk, you'll really like Atlassian Tech TV. So Chris, why don't you come on up here?
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks very much. Wow, a lot of people. Everyone having fun so far? Yeah. How'd you like the Daft Punk? Oh, I loved that. That was cool. Yes, so I've been at the company a long time, and I've got roughly 25 minutes to tell you how we make software. So obviously, I'm going to have to be a little selective. And so one of our values is open company, no bullshit. So I'm not going to be selecting anything that sounds good that isn't really what we do. And really, it's all about teams. And it's all about a sort of agile process. But I've selected from a kind of fast growth company, a fast learning company, and the things that we've done in the past and the things that we now do that are different to those things, I've selected three main areas. I wanted them to all start with A, so it would be, I don't know, but that just seemed like bullshit, so I didn't want to, this is the no bullshit thing. So, we talk about software methodologies as software developers and as members of software teams, but I don't really like that term because it suggests that things are a lot more static and predefined than I think they should be. And Agile is sort of about a reaction to that. So what do I mean by autonomy? Well, what that means for me, and I think what that means for Atlassian teams, is that the team gets to define their own process. So what's Atlassian software process? Well, it might depend on what team you're in. It won't be completely different in each team. There will be some consistency, but as you can see, there is a trade-off or a balance between autonomy, where teams get to define their process, and consistency, where teams need to be talking the same language and they need to be interacting with each other using something that is compatible or that is in some way the same. So some people may fear chaos, like a crazy riot. If you let the software teams just do what they want and define their own process, then you're going to end up with no kind of cohesion between the teams. And other people say, well, you don't want everyone to do things the same. We're not robots. We don't want consistency. It's boring. I'm a little bit like that. But I think what we need to recognize is that consistency, while it's valuable, it's useful, it solves problems, it adds efficiencies, it's not free. Okay, that coordination cost and ensuring that everyone is using the same process is not necessarily, at that maximal end, the most efficient thing to do. It's not the most sensible thing to do. And another important feature of autonomous teams, and an enabling feature at Atlassian, is cross-functional teams. So this means, like in the Lord of the Rings, in the Fellowship of the Ring, you've got many different people in that team. You've got designers and front-end and back-end engineers, QA engineers, and wizards and dwarfs and hobbits. And one of the things that we do to maintain autonomy or to encourage autonomy is to allow the team or to encourage the team to continuously redefine their process in baby steps using a standard agile practice, which is the retrospective meeting. And I have a couple of tips for you, things that we do. So this comes from an idea of, this is a Japanese word, kaizen, but really it just means continuous improvement. It isn't a sort of mysterious, mystical way of life. It just means continuous improvement. One of the things I really recommend that you do in your teams and that I encourage teams that I work with to do is to start the retrospective with a timeline. So hopefully you're only talking about maybe 2 weeks worth of work, things that you can remember. If it's 6 months, nobody's going to remember it all. But the timeline really helps you hang just what happened. Oh, that thing, that problem happened. That server went down, that mad scramble to make everything work. That occurred on, last week on Wednesday or whatever. You can just build a timeline and put the events on it. And then once you've done that and you've just shared a sense of the facts, the things that happened during that iteration, you can maybe use a system like start, stop, continue. Put your hand up if you've heard of that. Right, so that's probably about maybe 20%. So what that is it's just a structure for describing or reacting to what those events were, the significant events. You can say, well, we had this problem and then we had to fix it. We should start checking that, doing more code reviews or pair programming or taking some practice that you're aware of, some idea of change to your process, and start doing this new thing. So you might have 3 columns on a whiteboard. And then you could say, well, we tried that. Maybe in another retrospective, you say, well, let's stop doing that. It's not helping us. We thought it was going to be a good idea, and it turned out not to be. So stop. And continue is for those things that we're conscious that we're doing, that we need to continue to do because we're finding value from it. There are a few others. 3L is liked, lacked, loathed. I think you can pretty much guess. You pull those columns, and then you choose what things happened. I think using emotions in software processes is actually really useful because it kind of opens the permissions. People say, well, you liked that, and I liked this, and vanilla, chocolate. It's okay. We don't have to argue about it. It's not like I don't know, something sort of. Like, it's not an engineering topic, it's just an emotional reaction. Things that we felt that we lacked, things that we really loathed. I really don't like doing this. Maybe we can't do anything about it. Fine. And some people add another L for 4L, which is longed for. One good one that has a specific benefit is sad, happy, sad, confused. And the benefit of this is you don't jump into solving problems too early. So you are saying, I felt happy, I felt sad, I felt confused about this particular event, or attempting to use this practice element in our process, something we've introduced recently. And so the only remaining thing to say is that when you get to the end of the retrospective, you need to have some actions. You need to make that meeting count. So you need to perform some change, propose, okay, so we're going to do this, you're going to do that, I'm going to do this. But I would say most important is to have very few of those. Focus on very few changes. And one thing is that you can't just continually add extra practice to your process. You can't just say, oh, we're going to add this, and we're going to add this, and we're going to add this, because for everything you add, you're going to be taking some time away from some other activity that you've been doing. So I recommend also removing things that don't provide as much value as the rest of those items. And when you focus on the process, and when the team has autonomy for that process, you can see that the process is actually a kind of product. So you've got the software product. We think of all of our software team's output as a product, even if it isn't something that we sell to our customers for money. The process is also a product. And the team are the customers of it as well as other teams. So let's talk about automation. I want to say automation is the secret sauce, but if you've watched any of the talks or if you're engaged with software development, you'll know that this secret sauce it's not secret. Automation is the silver bullet. If there's a silver bullet, and apparently there's no silver bullets if you've read all those papers, but I would say that this is the biggest candidate for what can make the biggest impact to a software team. And it's easy to say, but it's actually quite difficult to achieve. And it's, again, continuous improvement. You're trying to improve things along the way. And I'm going to go into some detail about this now. So when I'm talking about automation in a software project, obviously continuous integration and deployment. I hate this term. It also makes me have to widen the template because these multi-syllable words, and I really want us to come up with, as an industry, some better terminology than this. Martin Fowler, bless him, thought of continuous integration, but it doesn't speak to most of us. So put your hand up if you feel a little bit, that might be a little foreign to you, that term, continuous integration. No, everybody. There's some shy little, yes, thank you very much. So, so what about builds? Put your hand up if you have builds, you know about builds. If I say build, you know what I'm talking about. All right, excellent. Now, how about automated tests? Everyone knows about that. And now, put your hand up if you have a build that doesn't have any automated tests in it. Yeah, and I bet you all, maybe you were shy to say that, but I'm sure that there's value there as well. Like you can have a build that doesn't have automated tests and you can get some value from it. But mostly I'm going to be talking about the automated tests kinds of build. And one of the things that Atlassian we do is we have in our definition of done, which means that for a given story or a task or a feature, whatever granularity you're talking about, there is a definition of what it means to be complete or done on that. And the definition of done includes automated tests. So the tests are written, they're software, they're unit tests, functional tests, and I'll give you some numbers now about my experience with them. So Jira has 18,606. This is, about a month old, this stat, so it's not quite the same number now. But have a guess what this is. Anyone want to guess what this number represents? Bugs? Unit tests. No, it's a million bugs, right? Unit tests in core. So core is like, I can't go into the details. Core is the sort of main blob of Jira, and the unit tests are a category of tests, and there are 18,606 of those currently. How about this one? I should say those unit tests these have a sort of 5-minute test run target, so they should. It's functional tests. So assertions was a good guess, but functional tests. So this is a lot more tests, and this is pretty much for the same project, which is the bulk of Jira's functionality, without the plugins kind of thing. But there's a lot of those, and there's more, in fact, than unit tests. What about this? You're never going to guess this. No, build plans. 759 build plans on one instance of Bamboo. All right, that's scary. That's a lot, yeah. So, and actually, as I was putting this talk together, I was talking to some people, and they were saying, "Oh, is 759? Is that a lot?" And I was just thinking, "Yeah, that's a lot." Well, it's a lot for us. It's as many as we've ever had for Jira. But going back to about 2008, we had a nightly build. And the nightly build meant that, it happened overnight. We just ran a big script, and that build happened, once a day. And actually, it expanded to take more than 24 hours. And we briefly considered renaming it the weekly build or something so that we could, get by. But actually, obviously, we had to engineer it down. And so you can see that wallboard there. There are 4 plans. And there are 2 branches, so there's 2 plans per branch, functional tests and unit tests. And you can see the numbers there much smaller. So we've come a long way, and the practices that we had to use then no longer serve us. We have to have parallel builds. We have to have a lot more infrastructure. We have to put a lot more engineering effort into our builds. So continuous integration and deployment is really the core of automation, and I really suggest you focus a lot of energy on that. But another enabling component of automation is feature branches, and you might think, why? Why is that related to automation? And I'll tell you. But first, what are feature branches? Put your hand up if you know what feature branching is as a strategy, and you know what it is, and keep your hand up if you use it. Most of the same numbers, so that looks like half, something like that. Cool. Well, I won't spend too long on explaining it, but the idea is that when you work on a feature, it may be a story, it may be something larger than a story, you branch from the main line of development or a line of development. You make your changes on that branch. So I'm talking about using Git or some distributed version control system like Mercurial, but it works also with Subversion or CVS. You could be using any of those tools and still follow this sort of practice. And importantly, you build that branch as well as maybe the main line of development. And this is a variation of feature branching called Git flow, or it's a schematic of it. where you've, in addition to feature branches, you also have release branches. But it doesn't really matter exactly what branch geometry you use or what practice you use. The idea of using branches to isolate independent work and to keep it isolated for as long as possible until the point that you can merge it. And of course, in order to merge it, the builds have to be green. And you can have criteria for merging. What you'd normally do is merge, say, master, just keeping it simple, merge master into your feature branch. That would bring all of the latest things that have been merged to master from elsewhere into your feature branch, and you would know by running the build for your new features plus what came from master that if you were to merge to master, it will pass. So if you pass, then if your feature branch passes, then merging to master will pass. And this is a good way to keep master green. But it's not just for keeping master green, it's also for enabling, call it the business, or anyone who wants to make a selection of current work in progress or work that's a candidate to ship, to say, all right, yes, we want to ship that and that and that. Can they be shipped? Will they work together? So feature branches enables answering questions like that. But there's some important information about, or consequences to that you need to know. And that is because branching begets merging. So not only, if you have feature branches, think about it, you've got builds for the features for the commits you're making, that's normal. You've also got builds for your master merge. So you merge master into your branch, you have a build, that would be an additional build. And then you merged back to master, you're going to build the same thing again, and hopefully it passes again, right? But who wants to stake their life on that? I mean, you've seen it. You merge from master to your feature branch, it passes, you merge that same thing back to master, and for some reason it fails. So all of these situations mean that you're going to be doing a lot more building if you use feature branches. And this has an impact. At Atlassian, we had this massive impact on the scalability of our build infrastructure and the availability of all of those resources to build much more, do much more builds. So again, maybe a few weeks out of date, but Atlassian has 150,000 builds per month happening just for our own core products. And in addition to that, the plugin ecosystem obviously goes well beyond that. And there are a lot of libraries that need to be built in order to ship our products. So there's a lot of builds. Now, how does that compare? 10 years ago when I started, we had maybe 50 builds in a month. Not 50,000, 50. So what we do in our build infrastructure, as well as inside our products and with the features, is we imagine these orders of magnitude, jumping up, adding another 0 to the number and say, what would it look like if we had, 1.5 million builds a month? What would that scenario be like? And the first reaction of the build team and everyone is like, oh, we're never going to get there. But after 10 years, I've heard that just way too many times, and we're definitely going to get there at some point. And it's not going to be 10 years' time, it'll be much sooner. So that's feature branches. Now, what about DevOps? Who's heard of DevOps? Okay, who's sick of hearing about DevOps? Yeah. But I think it's really cool. It's a really good idea, and it solves this problem. And that is, the developers say, it works for me, the tests are green, and they've chucked it over the wall, and Ops has to deal with that fallout. And why is this? Well, what's the problem? And that is because there's a wall there. There's two different mindsets, and they're measured on different things. Developers are trying to build as many features as possible and ship them, and operations is trying to keep things running. Well, if you want to keep things running, the last thing you want is a new version, right? So obviously this is set up to fail. And so actually a good way to solve this that I've heard, and I'm not saying that we do this religiously at Atlassian, but that is to measure operations on how many feature releases they can ingest, and measure development on on their uptime and the stability of their hosted products. And you get very different behaviors than if you have this setup. So what's that mean? Well, dev and ops need to really be one team. So you need to, they're in the same boat. DevOps, the word, obviously it just puts those two terms together. And I think the overriding message is that they can only win together. They can't win separately. There can't be a successful ops organization without development also winning And that mindset, that's something that we've consciously adopted at Atlassian. And I think on the sort of on the philosophy side, that's something that DevOps really represents. It's sort of a brand that represents that. But what is DevOps really? And there are a number of components to this. One thing I think is, from a developer point of view, which is cool, is infrastructure as code. And we see virtualization, we see containers like Docker, microservices and orchestration tool chains like Ansible, Puppet, and Rundeck, Fabric, these sort of tools that allow you to take control of the deployment process and of requisitioning resources, things that would be done with a screwdriver and plugging in and having servers delivered on trolleys. That sort of activity happens outside the sort of deployment and development and planning process because everything's virtual. So the servers are just plugged in like valves in a wartime computer, and they're just continually replaced like the hardware doesn't exist. Another thing is that in addition to the virtualization trend, that you consider the whole pipeline. You're not just talking about shipping a shrink-wrapped thing and posting it or putting it on a shelf in a retail outlet. You're talking about builds, but you're also, and this is a wallboard in one of our teams in Sydney, you're talking about builds, but you're also talking about quality at speed. What's quality mean? It's about the customer experience working. That lack of error rates have to be low. Also feedback about how the product works for them. You need to be looking at your deployment cadence. How frequently can you deploy? How cheap is it in your process to go through that whole loop? Monitoring, it's a core ops competency, but you also need to have inside the whole team everyone aware of what is happening in the instances. There are events, there are problems. We need to be conscious of them at all times. And something that's often missed, and it's essential for sort of growth activities, and I recommend you consider this for yourself, is customer insights. I call them that, but it could be information about or data about how your users behave with your app. How do you know that you delivered value unless you know that people are using your feature? Let alone that they're getting, that they're harnessing synergies or whatever they do, with your feature. Are they even using it? And if they're not, well, how can you have shipped value? You've shipped something, but it may not be value because the customer isn't using it. So you need to know what the customer's doing, and we've spent a lot of effort increasing our skill and ability in that. So stand-up meetings around the wallboard will show all of this stuff for the development team. So dev and ops collaborate in one team. And that's because in DevOps, it's a symbiosis. So this is a summary of what I just said. So development and operations only win together. Infrastructure is code, and it's a whole pipeline. Now I want to talk about culture, not because it's trendy, but despite the fact that it's trendy. And I think everyone turns off right now. They say, oh yeah, we've heard, and Atlassian's got a great culture, blah, blah, blah. Except what I'm saying here, and I didn't want to have to say this, but it's true, and I can't do the bullshit version. This is the no bullshit version. Culture enables our process. The things I'm going to tell you now are critical to make the process work. So you can't take what I've just said about cross-functional teams and the autonomous teams and DevOps, and that's. Can you hear me? Yeah. You can't take that and then just use it unless you have a culture that supports it. And the first thing I think that software teams need to recognize is that empathy is a skill. It is an essential skill for software developers and members of the software team. And this is really a banner term to describe, I think, how engineering can be improved in software process. And if you look at Agile through this lens, I think you'll see the pattern makes sense. The empathy is everywhere. If you don't care for your customer, everything will fall apart. So our process doesn't work without that. And what I recognized is that we have this really neat, bear with me here, this is sort of, I'm going to go out on a limb. So you've got engineering, and you've got empathy, and you've got culture. I've talked about those three things. And they overlap in a cool way. So this helps me situate all these concepts together. So where in Atlassian engineering and culture overlap, it's because we have an engineering culture. We approach problems with an engineering mindset. Something doesn't work, it's dysfunctional, we can fix that. We can use numbers, we can make changes. We can build a solution to that. We have an engineering culture, and I promote an engineering culture. We have also a culture of empathy. I've mentioned that. We have to care for the customer. I have to actually really care. You're our customers, many of you, and we care about you. You know, that's why we have conferences like this, and why I love coming to them. That's something we often select for as we hire people. So if you have people who are just not people or whatever it is, and they can't get there, I don't know how to help you. The other thing, and this is probably the most interesting thing, is that you can engineer empathy. You can create a skill called empathy in your software teams. And just like you can create a skill of coding in Clojure. And at Atlassian, I think what we're trying to do is bring all those three things together. And just about that engineering empathy, you have to teach little kids empathy. They don't come already knowing and caring about other people. You have to show them a poster with people's little faces, the happy face, the sad face, the scared face. And when one thumps the other one, and you say, you don't get angry, you say, now, you just punched Jane there. How do you think she's feeling? Happy? Yeah. Well, she's crying, and look at her mouth. It's turned down, and there's tears coming out, and her lip is blubbering. So you have to teach that, and this is not just a skill you can teach small children. It is a skill that you can continue to refine through adulthood and through all the subtlety. Some of the things we do to engineer empathy is we have personas. Who uses personas? Oh, no, not that many. So what they are is you have a model of a person. You might have a photo, stock photo, and then you'll attribute certain personality traits to them to represent your customers. You have to sort of have an understanding of your customers, and they're like a real customer. Maybe they're technical, maybe they get nervous, maybe they'll have a personality, and you've got to get to know them. And they're sort of, maybe you've got 10 of them, and they represent the range of customers you have. There's something we use, different archetypes of users. And we also have a program of having developers on support. This is something that builds a lot of empathy, because a developer, and these conferences are a part of it, go and meet customers, go talk to them about real things. It's really important. It builds empathy, and a developer on support does as well. Put a developer on support where they have to deal with only a stream of problems, generally, every day for, say, 2 weeks. And they really start to think, when they go back to their team, should I code this like that? It might really cause problems for those real people that I've just been dealing with. I think that's a fantastic way to build empathy as a skill in a development team. So I want to leave enough time for questions. I don't think I've done that. This is a summary. I covered autonomy, automation, and culture. And there was a question before I even started, which I want to address. Maybe Ryan can help me remember what that is. So I'm saying consistency is not free. You have to balance adherence to a process with your goal. The process is a product. You need a cross-functional team and an autonomous team using continuous improvement, automation, tests, feature branch workflow, DevOps, and a culture of empathy in engineering. Do we have any time for questions, Ryan?
We do. We probably have time for 2 questions. So let's start with the top one. How do you keep the on-prem and cloud products in sync during development?
That is not a quick answer. How do we do that? Well, we try and have as much, there's an architectural solution. We try and keep as much common modules or code together, so we isolate the things that are the same in both. Where things are not the same, we try to have well-defined interfaces and then 2 different implementations of those things. And we also, I think is it Conroy's law? The idea that when you structure the physical location or the orientation of your teams, you have people in a team here and people in a team there, then what you'll end up with is an architecture that reflects that shape. So the architecture becomes isomorphic to the way that the teams are distributed. If you have a team for the front end and a team for the back end, you can have an architecture with a front end module and a back end module, and maybe you do want that. But don't move your teams having one person, all the designers over there and all the QA over there, because then you'll end up with a mess. Hopefully that kind of touched on that, but I can talk about that afterwards as well.
Great. We have time probably for one more. How do you manage team capacity at the beginning of the sprint?
I assume what this is about estimation, and I think the best way is, obviously all estimation is a guess, but a team that is new together, that hasn't used that technology, that is, there's like 12 major sort of significant changes to how teams accuracy of estimates is, or things that impact accuracy in estimates. If you have all those things different, you have no chance to know how much work you can do, even in 2 weeks. So the best way is to try and keep things a little bit stable, and then use, that's called yesterday's weather. How much work did you do last sprint? Well, try doing the same amount again. Don't consistently over-promise what you can do. It's just lying to yourself.
Perfect. We are actually out of time.
All right, I will be available if anyone wants to talk to me about that stuff.
Thank you so much, Chris. Thanks so much, Chris. For those of you that want to stick around, we have the Principal Product Manager of Confluence, Sharif Mansour, presenting after this, and he will be talking about how to make the most of your product manager-developer relationship and how to improve it and grow it. So stick around. It's our last session of the day. Thanks so much. While everyone's filing out, I also wanted to make a quick announcement. In this room, after the keynote, that is after this next session, we will be hosting a editor competition where you can try out a prototype of the Confluence's collaborative editor. Come by, help try to build a page with a partner, and there's a prize for doing it in the fastest time. So if you want to try the new Confluence editor, a prototype of it, come here after the keynote at the end of the day.